Good evening, and this is In the Back Room with your host, Mr. Shank, and
Mr. Woods.
And today we're going to be talking to you about Japan and Mongolia.
Temendi Kalsa es Neskire.
So, let's start with Mongolia first, the Mongol horde. And these are nomadic herders. And what's a nomadic herder?
Yeah, so if we're talking about this phrase, nomadic herder, we should break it down. So a nomad is an individual who doesn't have a permanent settled home. I think you put it best whenever you talk to your students. You want to explain?
Yeah,
nomad?
they are mad because they have no home.
Yeah, essentially. So they're people that travel, and herders would travel more than perhaps other nomads because they have to take care of their flock of whatever animals. In the case of the Mongols, I believe it's primarily horses and like sheep.
I think
like
sheep. I think even
goats
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to take them to new pastures to graze, and so they're on the move frequently, herding these animals.
Eating that grass.
Got to get the grass.
Mm-hmm. So the time frame you have is 1206 to 1368 A.D.
Mm-hmm. We've taken quite a jump since China in time here, but we're still talking geographically the same region. I mean, the Mongols are from what we would today call Mongolia, or the steppes to the north of like the Gobi Desert, north of China.
We just stepped up from China.
Took a step up.
Took a step up.
Step below Russia.
So yeah, they're herding, and that's pretty much their entire lifestyle is driven on those horses. You know, they're eating, sleeping, fighting from age 3. They're on those horses.
Yeah.
That's a huge. I think each one has 4 apiece. You know, a warrior would have 4 at least, which is crazy.
And I mean, you've got to take into account that they have to feed these animals and take care of them. I mean, they're their best friends essentially.
Yeah.
You spend your life in horseback.
Well, horses life a lot less.
Yes, true.
What's the ratio? Because the dog's like every 7 years, a horse is like...
Yeah, I don't know. I was listening to a podcast about this one time, actually, where ironically, but it talks about how, with the exception of like certain mammals, it tends to scale up. So like the larger you are, the
less
longer.
time.
The
longer. The longer.
Oh. In some cases, cases, like humans are weird in that, but like you take elephants tend to live for a long time versus like dogs that don't.
That's why Loch Ness and Bigfoot are still around.
That's right. Although I don't know where like tortoises figure into that equation.
Yeah,
they live like
100 some years. Yeah.
So I don't remember who I was listening to discuss it, but it has something to do with just like they can measure your esophagus, and it had something to do with like the esophageal line length. And I don't know. I understood it while I listened to it. I don't understand it now thinking back.
But it's not as obviously as long as a human.
No, certainly not.
So, but there's the ratio is for every 1 human, there's 13 horses in Mongolia in the steppes, which is crazy today in modern. So who knows what it was back then?
I'm sure that it was probably greater. You would have had 1 less people, and 2, the horses would have been more of a necessity then than they are today.
Oh, absolutely,
I'm sure they're important today, just based on the way Mongolia is settled.
And the horses too are a lot. They're not like the big giant horses. They're like more like, I mean, I don't want to say medium-sized horses or whatever it may be.
I don't know what the specific breed is, though. I remember reading something about like how the difference between like say a European war horse in the Middle Ages versus like the Scandinavian short-legged horses that had like this extra gait, and so they could move at a different pace. Mm-hmm. Just the inverse of the plow horses that would have been used by the peasantry. Just the different bred for a different purpose. Mm-hmm.
That's just very interesting. We have Mongolia being the second largest empire ever, if we're talking territorially. Mm-hmm. The first would be Great Britain, which that doesn't happen until the more modern era, if you want to say it like that. We were a part of that empire here in America until we gained our independence. But a lot of the colonization that we see in the world today was caused by Great Britain.
Sun never sets on the British Empire.
It's true.
So
it's true. But we didn't ever figure out what was the population-wise, though, the largest empire.
I could probably, if you want to talk about the the founder there. I'll see if I can figure that out.
Yes. So the founder of the Mongolian Empire, the Mongols had always kind of, been there, those people, but you have Genghis Khan or Temujin king, kind of coming from, kind of like, well, the underdog. I mean, basically but shouldn't have been anything, and kind of, rises to power, and you have between 1162 and you have 1229, rises to power and creates and unites the Mongol people in what we know as, say, Mongolia and China and so forth, and starts just ravaging the countryside. And just in a limited amount of time, because they're so quick on those horses, was able to, again, get that second largest territorially, square mileage, the largest empire in the world.
So I've actually got an addition to that. They are ranked number 1 for the largest, contiguous empire, as in all parts of it being connected.
Oh,
the British Empire, how you've got colonies, so it's not physically connected. The Mongolian Empire was actually physically connected.
Okay.
So they are the number 1 largest contiguous empire that the world has seen. And then landmass next, I've got Russia, the Russian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as people go, what I'm reading here is it's still the British Empire,
really?
being the largest.
Makes a little more sense. It's modern,
right? And then to be honest, I don't even see Rome on this list of the top 10. You've got the Abbasid and Umayyad caliphates. You've got the Portuguese Empire. But Rome isn't even on the list.
Yeah.
Of top 10. So.
Okay.
I found that interesting.
So main thing from him is that Genghis Khan or Genghis, Chinggis Khan, they revere him as almost like a god over there. It's quite different in the West, where we view him as this, barbarian who is just, destroying the countryside and placing genocide in an entire group of people. But over in Mongolia, he's like George Washington on steroids, essentially.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just different. It's just interesting.
Did you talk about how what they come to know his group as is that Khanate of the Golden Horde?
I did not talk about that yet.
So yeah, the Khanate of the Golden Horde, or Kingdom of the Royal Camp. And as I was researching some stuff for this podcast, it came up that the word horde, as used by the Mongols, is actually ascribed to them by the Russians, which is the group that interacted primarily with the Golden Horde, as Orda, which just means horde. So that's where that word kind of evolves from, as that Cyrillic.
Isn't it in Lord of the Rings? It's they call it the Horde as well, the Horde of Orcs or something like that.
And don't forget World of Warcraft.
Maybe that's what
Warcraft. So you have the Alliance.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah. I knew I had heard that term before I even learned anything with Mongols.
That was one of our missing podcasters, the great Gregarious Gujanicus.
Oh yeah, that's right. That is right. So with Genghis Khan, killing over 40 million people in his lifetime, not him personally, just and we can talk about this, how this is, I think I described it earlier today as indirect collateral damage, indirect collateral damage, where he did not personally kill 400 million or 40 million people, but he caused, hey, you guys go over there, destroy that village, kill everyone there. Or he ends up, I'm going to, I end up killing your entire family, and then you're this little baby that's left on the hillside. Well, he didn't actually do anything physically to you, but now you don't have anybody to feed you, take care of you. You're going to die. Yeah. So it's that secondary cause that's really...
Yeah, responsible for the deaths of 40 million people.
Right. So we have to always, in history, look and see where not just the initial cause of what happens, but the aftermath of, and that's also counted in there.
Yeah, that's where we get into later. I guess we could talk about this, but war crimes later. How many people did Adolf Hitler directly kill? Mm-hmm. I don't even know if any. Maybe during his service in World War I, but I don't think so.
He was a runner,
like a messenger. So I would hazard to guess none. But responsible for responsible for the deaths of millions. Add into that figures like Stalin arguably Kissinger, right? Secretary of State under, was that Nixon, I think?
I think so.
Vietnam, end of Vietnam. So I think that's Nixon.
End of Vietnam, yeah, 76.
Ford, Nixon.
That era, yeah.
Yeah, in there.
Well, with the Mongolians, before we move on, with that 40 million, 1 in 200 people carry his DNA. And that stems from, once they would kill everyone in the village, if you didn't surrender immediately, everyone's dead. And they would more than likely take the women and then do whatever. A lot of his generals, too, have the same DNA, like the DNA. It's like 1 in 200 as well.
I mean, he has like a lot of his descendants, or direct descendants from like an official marriage, but the number of officers under them that are, the bastard children of would be innumerable.
Yeah, say incalculable. So obviously not in here in this area you're gonna have 1 in every 200 people, but you go over into Asia, you go into Mongolia, there's a high chance somebody's carrying their DNA. Do they know? More than likely not.
Yeah.
But there's just that probability's that high, 1 in every 200 people.
Yeah, I would imagine if you examine just the region that was formerly under his control, I'm sure that proportion is
way higher.
Way out, like 1 in 2, if not.
Yeah, that 1 in 200 is in the world. That's not just in Mongolia. That's in the world.
Right.
But I just always found that when kids see that and they're like, "Wait, what?" I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah. I think there's a TED Ed video about that too, where they kind of debate the nature of Genghis Khan. Was he good or was he evil?
Well, that's the TED Ed is put him on trial. Yeah, that's what the kids were watching. Some of them today and yesterday.
Oh, okay. That's good.
After it is really good because you can also make the case that geographically, just killing all those people agriculturally, that they affected the landscape of Mongolia, drastically changed that for generations to come. The fact, and even to this day, that was 800 years ago. But moving on, the Mongol Empire is they have what's rare in ancient times, which is freedom of
religion.
Religion.
Yeah. Toleration of other religions. Because I believe the Mongols had their own kind of nature-based faith, but they were quick to adapt to other religions, and quick to accept other religions, not just accept them, but fully adopt them. You see that with the Yuan dynasty of China, which is a Mongol-operated dynasty, but they venerated ancestors the same as the Chinese and accepted Confucianism as a philosophy, the same as the Chinese that they were conquering, essentially.
It's that cultural diffusion that is so important. I mean, when you have an empire that big, you have to be able to accept, because you're stretching all the way through different continents and different regions. You're going to encounter Islam, Buddhism, Christianity. Just the list goes on and on.
I'm pretty sure that shortly after the siege of Baghdad, was it 1258? I'm pretty sure shortly after that they adopt Islam in that region as their faith too, just because it's easily fit.
Yeah, which is which is rare. We'd have the Persians if we were trying to cross-reference here a little bit and just compare. They're another empire that had religious tolerance, and you're going to be more successful if you're more tolerant of people. That's just in general, whether it's an empire or just personally. Yeah. You're going to go a lot farther if you can tolerate. Hey, I don't necessarily believe in what you believe in, but you go ahead, practice what you want. Just pay me some taxes. But that's typically how it goes, and that's one of the our 5 basic freedoms. The Bill of Rights. It's the first one, but it's in the Bill of Rights. Besides free speech, I think freedom of religion is pretty high up there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it was Aristotle that said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it. Yeah. So that's tolerance in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But again,
you don't have to dismiss it out of hand.
Right.
You can tolerate and listen to someone else's viewpoint.
Well, especially too, because I say this to my students. I said, well, there's been over 4,000 religions ever, and one of us maybe is right, all of us are right, or none of us are. Just stick to whatever you do, your own faith, and just keep it at that.
Yeah. That's
so. Safe and secure trading in the West along the Silk Road, right?
Right, yeah, just that, the fact that the empire covered that territory does instill a system of, or a feeling of security, because you know that there is an occupying force that's attempting to keep brigands and bandits off of the road and make trade more readily available, because it helps them. I mean, the better the economy of their conquered territory, the more they can get in taxes.
Yeah, you don't want to be blocking trade in any regard, or shutting it down, because once you do that, one, you do stop cultural diffusion, and two, you're going to economically start to break down. It's not going to be immediate, but it will definitely happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the Mongols operated in Russia. Russia was essentially a tributary state of the Mongol Empire until they said, hey, we're going to stop paying. And that's kind of a mark of the later end of the Mongols' empire, too, that it was a bloodless conflict. When Russians finally, had enough military strength to be able to pose a real resistance to the Mongols, and they said, hey, we're done, we're breaking off, any kind of, maybe not trade relations, but this tributary system, the Mongols were just like, okay, and left to go find someone who's more, more accepting of their leadership or their overlording.
Yeah, that's fair.
That was hold on. Let's for the sake of accuracy. Was it Ivan the Third? Ivan the Third that throws off the Mongols.
Yes.
Okay.
Ivan the Third. Ivan the Great.
Yeah.
Because Ivan the Terrible came next with Ivan Fourth. IV, is his nickname. So educate the masses, and this. And I make the joke. This is not just educating large people. This is educating everyone. So that in itself is just it's incredibly it's admirable for sure, because a more educated population, and we'll hit this theme throughout, is a much better society.
I mean, sure. I drilled on that today, even in class, just because the question. We're reviewing material that we've already covered and talking about the test, and there was a sense of why does this matter? Why should I pay attention? That kind of thing, and it's like. If you drill into the individual civilizations that we've already talked about, let alone the ones we will explore, one of the core tenets for their belief of success was to have an educated people. Unless they're a totalitarian regime or some autocracy, education was important. And so we see that, even here in the Mongol Empire, we'll see it in Japan. We see it in Greece. We see it in Rome. Everywhere we can think of. Even Charlemagne, right? The idea of having an educated people is important. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that's the reason we have this egalitarian-style educational system in the United States that we do, where we try to provide an equal education for everyone.
I say, do you want to... Egalitarian probably might be over some of them.
Equal, equitable, even to all, something like that. But that concept that we should have everyone educated is because we're all citizens. I mean, we all hold the same level of power, the vote. It doesn't matter whether you hold a PhD or a high school diploma, you have the same power to affect government as anyone else that holds the status of citizen.
Even the person running, he only gets one vote.
Yeah, he only can vote
just
for
as much
as
me or you.
Yeah,
the power of voting. But I see you drew a nice little yurt.
Yes.
You want to explain the yurt?
So the yurt is like a mobile home, basically, for the Mongols. But I mean, you have to consider the fact that they spent a great deal of their time on horseback. So whatever they did carry with them had to be a temporary form of shelter. And it's not like they would have used these every night. You're not going to make camp every night. But when you do make camp, or the horde gathers together, you have to have somewhere to stay if you're going to stay for a few days. So these would be, portable homes, essentially. Not even necessarily meaning you have to carry all of the pieces. You take the canvas or furs or hide or whatever you're going to stretch over to make the canopy, almost like a Native American teepee or something of that sense, where the wood, the sticks that you're going to use to form the frame for it can come from anywhere that you are. That can be cut and set up, and then that's all it is. The floor is done in furs or some type of hides, and same with the shell of it.
Yeah.
And according to, and I don't know how much historical evidence there is on this. I've never really done any more research on it other than hearing it.
On the history of yurts.
On the history of yurts, right. My level of scholarship on that's low.
Yeah.
But I know
PhD.
that it would not surprise me. But I know that the story is that Genghis Khan's yurt was actually pulled by oxen across his empire. So he didn't even have to tear down his yurt. I mean,
So
the dude
crazy.
rode in an RV when everybody else was stuck with campers. You know, like...
Yeah, this is crazy.
It is. It is crazy.
But that concludes the Mongols. So we'll shift our focus to Japan. With the symbol in the flag being that red circle with the white overlay, which this past summer I took a group of students to Japan, and that was quite an experience for sure. So I'm well versed, but I have more of an insight than most on this. But the geography of it, so we have it's an archipelago, which we learned today in class means that it's a chain of islands. And the four main ones are Honshu, Kyushu, Shikoku, and Hokkaido. Did I pronounce that correctly, or am I a little bit off?
I mean, you pronounced it better than I would have, and more close to what we heard, through the pronunciation channeling of it than I could mimic. Because I usually, just for the simplicity and the sake of my Western accent, just say Hokkaido, Honshu, Kishu, and Shikoku. But I guess those U's are more drawn out.
Yeah, the U's are longer. Kyushu, Kyushu. And Shikoku, so they're more drawn out. But it just because there's four main islands doesn't mean that's all there is. Because we have
There's 7.
There's just no, yeah. There's that was like today. They're like, I asked them, hey, how many islands? And they're like, okay, there's 1, like now a little higher. There's 3, like a little higher. There's 6, there's lower. 5, lower than that. 4. I was like just going like drawn out. They were all so excited.
It's like the worst game of Battleship.
It was really bad.
Shoot every square around the enemy ship.
But you have Tokyo, which is where everyone kind of knows Tokyo. Did you know how populated Tokyo was? I didn't realize how populated it was.
I assume it's extremely dense.
It's like 30 million people. I didn't. It's top 3, I think.
Really?
Yeah. Which that blew my mind. I mean, it was crowded, but I didn't realize that when I looked that up when I got home. I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
But on the main island, Honshu, you have Kyoto, which would be about how would you describe it? And it's in the middle of that island, but it'd be on the eastern side.
Yeah. It's kind of like I don't know if you would refer to that as a peninsula on the island, but it's kind of like at the base of that southwestern peninsula.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I would describe it other than southwest of Tokyo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then as you go west, we took a bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto west, and it took us about 2 hours, and a bullet train moves about 200 miles an hour. Oh man, those bullet trains!
I bet that was crazy.
It doesn't even feel like you're moving. You're like,
awesome.
It's going 200 miles an hour,
and those are magnetic, right?
Magnetic, yeah.
That's crazy. Power of science, folks.
Got to study science for sure. I just remember being in Italy with Gregarious Gujanicus.
Oh yes.
It was going like 70 miles an hour, and it felt like we're going to fly off the tracks.
Yeah.
Like we're all going to die. And then here in the technology advances in Japan, where it's like, all right, we're going 200 miles an hour, and I don't even know I'm moving.
Yeah.
It was just really cool how it was set up.
Crazy. The Magna Lev.
Mm-hmm. And then you have Osaka being a little bit south of Kyoto, southwest of Kyoto. The other islands that you have, the smaller ones, Shikoku and Kyushu, those would be on the western, I guess like southwestern sides if you're be on the southern regions. They're much, much smaller than the mainland. And then you have the Hokkaido and the very north end.
And then, just like 6,848 other islands.
Wow, yeah, pretty much, yeah. And there's probably new islands popping up, too.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain that you have the sea and the...
Right. So we've got on this little map. If you look at the attached graphic for this podcast on my website, you've got the Sea of Japan to the, I guess, northwest of Japan's main island, and then the Pacific Ocean to the east. And then what I don't have displayed on this, so if you're looking at a world map, right, Japan is going to be kind of like off the southern coast of South Korea and like to the south and east of South Korea and like in there with China and even I think, well, I don't know, not directly but bordering Russia too in a way. So a lot of the culture that we're going to talk about would be recognizable, like to what we've studied with China, because it's how it gets there. I mean, the culture progresses from China through the Korean Peninsula and to the islands of Japan.
Yeah, it definitely, they definitely borrow a lot from them for sure.
I seem to remember, I don't know where I remember it from, but a myth about the islands of Japan being formed from like blood dripping from a katana. I don't know if it's actually true as a myth or if it's just like a Westernese myth of
Sounds
Japan.
true. That's true.
And I do remember something too about like the importance of the sun being tied to the goddess Amaterasu, because she's kind of like a chief sun deity. And then like
you said Amaterasu.
Yeah, that's how I would pronounce it.
I think I said a man or a Sioux.
Wow, there's the Johnstown coming out.
There's a little bit of Western PA coming out.
I think it's
Amaterasu
and
makes
I don't
sense.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right either.
It sounds better than
Amaterasu, and then I think there's so I don't know if I'm even right on this, but I know there's like in the mythology there's a dragon that dwells in the sea, and it's like Watasumi. But if you actually look at the way it's spelled, it's like tsunami. Like, so I wonder. I'm sort of wondering if the tsunamis, the tidal waves, are effects from the movement of this dragon dwelling in the sea.
That would make sense.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know, but that's just me putting it together.
Yeah,
in my head.
like I said, that makes sense. I don't. Seems right.
Yeah, I don't. There's like a god of like the tempests and stuff too, but his name is escaping me. I know it's like a brother or cousin of Amaterasu, but I don't know. Maybe I can look it up while we move on to
movingon.com.
That's right. Away from the mythology and more to the important religions that we're going to see crop up in Japan.
Correct. So the main religion of Japan is Shinto. And this is the way of kami. Divine spirits inhabit everything. Whether it be in a mountain or in this tree or in a person, a dog, an animal. There's these divine meaning godlike spirits in everything. And it's similar to animism. Like I said, spirits in everything. And when I was in Japan, they took religion semi seriously, I guess, to a degree, but it was more of this is funny because a lot of them, when they were explaining to us the reason why they would go into these shrines and they would do like a ceremonial prayer or something like that, it was because of a test. It was legitimately because of a test.
Education once again,
yeah,
folks.
Because they knew like how important these tests were to their success later in life, whether it be something small like, at a very young age, maybe like elementary or something, but obviously the higher you get, the more is on the line.
And you said that like the prayer is very ritual based.
Oh yeah, there's a certain way that you have like the purifying water, and before you even go up to essentially you maybe toss a few coins, but into there before you even get up there, you would essentially have like a little like water. It's like a long stick. At the very end of it, they have a little bit of opening for the water. You scoop it in. And then there's a certain way you have to like put it on from the right to the left, from the left to the right on your hands with this cup and pour it onto there. And then you have to like just put a little bit on your mouth then too. And then make sure when you drain it that you hold it straight up so the water drains down your hand into your wrist and down into the rest of it. And that's a way of like purifying it for the next person, essentially, and cleaning it. And then once you do that, you go back up to the altar or whatever you want to call it, and you there's different ones that they have, but they might have one where there's like ash essentially or like incense or something like that, and you would kind of do kind of like here, not like a cross, but almost like, over one shoulder, over the other, and then do like a bow, and then kind of move on.
Yeah.
And so forth. But it just depends. There's a lot of different things. We did a lot of different, like almost like cultural assimilation rituals when we were there.
I know a lot of Japanese culture is very ritual based.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, I mean, like even just looking at, just from my own interest, looking at like how swordsmanship is done with the katana, like the way you draw it, the way you hold it, everything is very ritual based and every movement it's almost like choreo. It's dancing. It's really like, as opposed to earlier stuff that we would have talked about, or like medieval swordsmanship. It's just a brawl, basically. In Japan, it's dueling later in the period, but it's all almost like a dance. It's very choreographed in a way. There's moves and counter moves, and
there's a reason for everything they do. There's a purpose, as what something represents, or why they do it this way or that way, which I found very fascinating for sure.
Sorry, just I found him.
Oh, you did? Nice.
Susanoo. And it is Amaterasu's brother. He's a storm god of the summer.
Stormtrooper.
Captain Phasma. Man.
So with Shintoism, and you may have done this on your vocabulary, you probably brought up an image of, it kind of looks like how would you describe it?
It's almost like so like the capital the pie.
I was thinking pie. Yeah, I was thinking pie, like a capital T with so you basically have just a few. I know when I have when I have a driveway one day, I'm having a Shinto shrine ready.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't care how I have to have it built, but I'm having it.
Yeah, it's like the capital variant of pie, so without like the swishes at the bottom, but like the crossbar with two pillars.
Which it's very fitting too for this, especially because our table is the colors of this. And I specifically had the table that we have here in the back room.
Custom ordered
from Japan. They brought it in, shipped it out, free of charge, obviously.
I mean, they've heard our podcast.
Oh yeah, just millions upon billions, trillions. Yeah, we're making up new numbers here.
Yeah,
with listeners. And the Torii is spelled Torii, and it's essentially when you enter this gateway, because you go underneath it, and they'll have it in, whether it be in an entranceway into like a park, or you have it going through a water. You're cleansing your spirit, and you're almost entering into like the world of the gods, spirit world almost, when you're going through. And when you're in Japan, no matter what you do, you're going through one of these because they're under a car. You'll go under it with it, or you'll go under. We went to the one that was like 10,000 shrines. Yeah, you're hiking to the top of this hill, and there's shrine after shrine, these Torii shrines, shrine. It's just like you're overloaded with shrines.
Well, I mean, when you think about the animistic style of belief, like where spirits inhabit everything, you require that cleansing everywhere you go.
It's true.
I mean, these arches are far more important than the McDonald's arches. I mean, we're not talking about cleansing your spirit for a Big Mac. We're talking about gods here, folks.
You're cleansing more than just your spirit with one of those.
That's true. Wash everything clean.
Oh, man. But yeah, you'll once you see it, you'll automatically know, and hopefully in due time, we're going to have, outside of my room, we'll have the Torii Arch. So when they enter in, their spirits will be cleansed.
There needs to be some cleansing.
So that would bring us to Zen Buddhism. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my understanding of Zen Buddhism, and I'm by no means a scholar here either, but it's the kind of blending of the Buddhist traditions as they progress through China, kind of mixing with a bit of Taoism here and a bit of Shinto when it arrives in Japan, and it's Buddhist philosophy of the Mahayana flavor of it, where they regard Buddha as a divine, and it's more focused on, I guess, peace. Like you see the Zen gardens, like the raking of like the sand and everything like that. So it's very much about peace and kind of
meditation.
Yeah. So I think it focuses more on that than just kind of the path of suffering, would be my understanding.
Yes, they just mix these they'll eventually mix these religions together. So you ask the state religion of Japan, and it's
if
there is
one.
If there is one, that's the thing. It's like
Shinto is like it's unique to Japan, but I wouldn't say that it's a state religion. I don't even know if they technically would have one.
I don't think they would either.
I feel like with just the mixing, like they are wondrously able to take the good and isolate it for the benefit of their society.
Which is what a lot of, well, I'm going to say a lot, but you can do with any religion. And, you don't have to believe in the entire religion of karma to believe in karma. For the entire religion of Hinduism to believe in karma, or Buddhism.
I think without getting into too much theology there, I think that's where most religions struggle, because you've got a doctrine of belief. It's hard to isolate any one part of it, because to say, okay, well, this is good and this is bad, well, then it can't be both. You know what I mean? Because if it all comes in one package, you can't have one part without the rest.
Right.
I think the the kind of the philosophies that we talk about are the way around that, where you can isolate the moral good things from any kind of maybe religious doctrine associated with it. So I mean, to each their own, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting how that concept is able to be applied with Shinto, where it's almost in what you find in it.
No, I definitely 100% agree with you. Is that where you're trying to go with, from India to China to Korea to Japan?
Yeah, I ran out of paper.
I saw that.
If you look at the notes, that's why Japan drops down so much below Korea.
Whoa, slipped.
It's the progression of, just culture in general, but Buddhism and then just belief not belief, but just ideas in general from China for sure. But that eastward march started by Ashoka, right? That spread of culture tied to the religion that gets spread of Buddhism, but makes its way through China and Korea and to Japan by extension of that.
Yeah, definitely a big advocate for culture spreading. Which, after religion, we can bring this to the last section here, which is the Japanese feudalism.
Yeah, the social structure of the feudal period. So you've got, you have this figure of the emperor at the top, though I don't know how much power the emperor always had. I know through much of it, there's that cultural respect, almost like a filial piety type respect for the emperor. But I think that as far as like real wieldable power, I think later in Japanese culture that falls more on the shoguns as kind of feudalism breaks down. At the end of that it's like a civil war that breaks out in Japan. I can't place the time period. I would say near the Heian period of Japan, but the Civil War period of Japan, where there's different factions warring against one another, and the emperor, there's essentially two of them, and so there's less power between them. So that these warlord figures of the shogun kind of take over. And then, of course, you have below the shogun, you have like the daimyo and the samurai. And then, of course, the peasants, right? Down at the very bottom. This is where ninjas actually come from. Ninjas were just peasant farmers fighting back against oppression from samurai. They are real, though they're not as cool as the turtles that make them out to be, right?
Full circle, we were talking about turtles earlier.
Yeah, talk about the circularity of it, right?
Yeah, and with that, did you talk about? Sorry, I was looking at. You can't load Word on Google Chrome, I'm assuming, because I was trying to find.
I think it was Google Docs.
Yeah, it's not trying to do it because I was trying to look for the actual like SOL on the DOE website. I thought I saw they mentioned something about like the emperor and like almost worshiping the emperor.
Yeah, I'm sure there is like that reverential respect given to the emperor, because we see that. I mean, you saw that even in World War II. So I think that respect is there. I think that the breakdown in Japanese society was during that Civil War. Like the emperor sort of lost control of what was going on.
Lost his swag.
More to it fell down to more like local leaders who could actually provide tangible protection for the people.
He lost that country swag.
Country slang.
But Bushido is their code of honor, and what is this similar to in the West?
So in the West, we have what's called chivalry, which is kind of a similar code of honor among the warrior class of knights in feudal Europe. And much of it's the same, although I will say that I find Bushido to be more personal, because it's more focused on you as an individual rather than how you should serve God and how you should serve your lord and women and all of that. It's more about your relationship with the world, I feel like, with Bushido. Do you want to talk about some of the tenets of Bushido? You're more familiar than I.
Yeah, and these are just great characteristic traits in anybody, and this is you're having integrity, respect, courage, honor, compassion, loyalty, and honesty. How many of us can say that at all times our integrity is always the best? We're always respectful. We're always courageous and honorable and compassionate and loyal and honest and everything like that. We try to be, but that you're looking at the epitome of this. This is like the rap, but like the adult version and very, very strict. And
I mean, it's an honor code, and to violate that honor code came with penalty. I mean, to bring dishonor wasn't just on yourself.
Ronin.
The Ronin, the masterless samurai, right?
Sorry, I didn't even see you. You wrote that.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I'm a step ahead.
Yeah, you are.
But the concept of foregoing honor for personal glory is really what the Ronin becomes when the civil wars break down feudal lordship. You just kind of have samurai who want to fight that don't have a lord to fight for anymore, so they just go around fighting.
They're just bored.
I mean, that's really when you have warriors and you take away the war.
What do you do with them?
What do you do with them?
Yeah.
How do you reintegrate them into society?
Good luck with that.
We try to do it now and still haven't figured it out 2,000 years later or 1,500 years later.
We try to put them in similar positions, but it still doesn't always work out.
Yeah,
or you put them in an exact opposite position, and it's like they just can't. They can't do it.
No, I mean you're trained for one thing. That's how it works, and then you take that away.
But do you want to talk about the Five Rings?
Oh yes, Miyamoto Musashi and the Five Rings. So it's a philosophy. So Musashi is this undefeated Ronin duelist samurai of the later period of that civil war. And he basically just roamed the countryside fighting anyone who he would fight, and did so in a way that would be viewed as dishonorable, because he's outwitting his opponents. I remember reading about a couple different accounts of stories, like showing up late to the first several duels that he fought, which aggravated individuals. So then they planned on him showing up late, and so they had prepared a kind of ambush for him, and that time he happened to show up hours early and was able to thwart the ambush. Or where he was tangled up in the Kusarigama's chain, and where it would have eventually led to his death, he drew his short sword and threw it at the opponent, killing him. So instead of maintaining the honor of using his single weapon chosen for that duel, he pulled his extra weapon and threw it at him, winning the duel, but at what expense to one's honor. And then there's the duel with the famous one with I think he's the Sasaki Kojiro is his name, the devil of the Western Province or something like that. But he basically beats him to death with a wooden oar. I mean, just shows up dirty and disheveled.
I do remember that,
and it angers Kojiro, who's the pinnacle of samuraihood, and so he rushes in without thinking, and that's what Musashi planned on. I mean, the Book of Five Rings is a philosophy of how to engage with everyone. I mean, it talks about swordsmanship and things like that, but it's also just an interaction. How you can strategize about every interaction and prepare yourself, and not only that, but kind of lead your opponent or the interlocutor on the other side into wherever you want them.
And we translate it into the business world and everything else you can. I mean, that's I need to read more with that. I definitely want to read the Book of Five Rings, which is he wrote about.
Yeah, supposedly while he was like in a self-imposed isolation in a cave. I don't know how much.
Does everyone write in a cave?
It seems like that's the.
Whenever there's like something profound, people go to caves.
They do. One thing I found interesting was the tie of like samurai to writing, to art, to literature, like studying those things, like things that you wouldn't normally associate with a warrior, like the comparability of wielding a sword to holding a brush for painting or for writing, just the discipline that's required. So it's kind of across. They're cultured individuals. These samurai aren't just men given a sword. They're kind of like this well-rounded, educated individual.
Renaissance man.
Yeah, of sorts. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that will conclude our podcast. The cause of fear is ignorance. So this has been Mr. Shank
and Mr. Woods.
And this was In the Back Room, and thank you for listening.